Halloween in New York City. It's a day that everyone looks forward to. The excitement is palpable as the city prepares for one of the biggest celebrations of the year. People of all ages spend weeks planning their costumes, aiming to outdo each other with the spookiest, most creative outfits. In the heart of the city, the streets come alive with parades, parties, and an endless stream of eerie revelers. It's not just the kids dressed up. Adults get into the spirit, too, with elaborate costumes that range from terrifying to wildly imaginative. If you find yourself walking through downtown, you can expect to see some of the most jaw-dropping costumes you've ever seen, as people gather for the iconic Halloween parade. But this year, Halloween would have a darker twist for one unsuspecting soul. The fun of Halloween isn't just in the costumes. There's carving pumpkins, binge-watching classic horror films, and, of course, trick-or-treating. It's a tradition that goes far beyond New York City. For kids, it's the ultimate thrill. The one time of year they can collect as much candy as their hearts desire, without the usual warnings about cavities or sugar overload. It's all about the fun, the spooky excitement shared with friends and family. Halloween's origins trace back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, a time to mark the end of summer. It was believed that during this festival, the veil between the living and the spirit world grew thin, allowing spirits to wander the earth. To protect themselves from these roaming spirits, people would don frightening costumes, hoping to ward off any evil forces that might cross their path. It was a night meant for fun, but also one where fear and superstition took center stage. But as much as Halloween is about spirits and supernatural fears, the true horror often lies much closer to home. The real monsters, they're not the ones haunting the afterlife. They walk among us. It's the living, the people we pass every day, who can be just as dangerous, if not more. And it's them we should be most cautious of, because the greatest threats don't always come from the other side. Sometimes, they come from those standing right in front of us. On the night of October 31st, 1992, exactly 31 years ago, a 4-year-old boy eagerly awaited his father's arrival, excited for the night ahead, where they would roam the streets together, trick-or-treating. But that night, the boy would never make it home. And the reason for his disappearance would be far darker than any ghost story or haunted tale could ever compare to, leaving those who loved him shattered and terrified by the true horror that unfolded. Our story starts on Halloween night, October 31st, 1992, in Brooklyn, New York. As I dug into this case, I found something strange. The man at the center of it was referred to as both Roman Cruz and Raymond Cruz in different articles, sometimes even in the same article. Despite searching both names, very little information surfaced about what actually happened. To keep things clear and avoid any confusion, I'll refer to him simply by his last name, Cruz. Normally, I'd give you more background on the person we're discussing, but in this case, there's very little to go on. I'm sharing this story not just to keep Mr. Cruz's memory alive, but also to bring attention to his case, whatever the truth may be. With so little media coverage, it's difficult to know whether his case is still unsolved. What we do know about Mr. Cruz is this: he was just 34 years old when his life was tragically cut short. Loved ones remember him as a man who always wore a smile, someone cheerful, respectful, and hardworking. He dedicated much of his time to his job at an auto salvage yard on Pennsylvania Avenue in the East New York section of Brooklyn. In 1992, he was living with his uncle and brother on Gates Avenue, where he would commute from each day. While Cruz was known for his positive attitude, nothing brought him more joy than spending time with his 4-year-old son. He was deeply proud of his role as a father, and the bond they shared was incredibly strong. Cruz's uncle described him as someone who always had a smile on his face, a respectful and hardworking man. He would take his son to the movies every Saturday, and they were inseparable. On the morning of October 31st, Cruz's plans were simple. He would go to work, and later that evening, he would pick up his son to take him trick-or-treating just like countless other parents across the city. But Cruz never made it to his destination that night. And when his family finally learned why, it left them in shock, devastated, and desperate for answers. Cruz went about his day like it was any other, but this ordinary day would soon turn into a nightmare. After his shift at the salvage yard on Pennsylvania Avenue, a coworker dropped him off at the train station at North Conduit in Grant Avenue around 1 p.m. From there, Cruz disappeared into the city streets, and what happened next remains a chilling mystery. For the next 6 hours, there's no record of where Cruz went. Was he running errands? Visiting friends? What could have possibly happened during those lost hours? His family later revealed that Cruz had several friends in the East New York area, but when the police checked with them, no one had seen him. No one had heard from him. And as the sun began to set, Cruz's fate took a horrifying turn. By 7:30 p.m., Cruz would come face to face with a group of men who had no good intentions. The street was eerily quiet as he walked through East New York, unknowingly heading straight into danger. Right near a vacant lot on Pitkin and Grant Avenue, Cruz would be approached by 3 men. What followed next was far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. Without warning, the 3 men pounced on Cruz, dragging him into the vacant lot like a pack of predators. As they threw him to the ground, 2 of them held him down with terrifying force, while the 3rd man stepped back to retrieve a canister filled with gasoline, or something worse. With a cruel determination, he began dousing Cruz's body with the accelerant, drenching him from head to toe. Then, in a sickening moment of finality, the man struck a match and tossed it at Cruz, igniting his body in a horrific blaze. Flames erupted around him, engulfing his skin and flesh as he screamed in agony. But the worst part, Cruz was fully conscious. He could feel every inch of his body burning, fully aware of the nightmare unfolding. His life, his future, had been stolen from him in an act of senseless cruelty. As he writhed in pain, the only words Cruz would hear before the men fled into the night were chilling, "Happy Halloween." The men, seemingly satisfied with their horrific act, ran off into the darkness, leaving Cruz to suffer in the flames. Moments later, a car screeched into the entrance of Brookdale Hospital. A man jumped out of the car, frantically yelling at the ambulance staff. "Get a doctor, hurry!" he cried. And there, in the back seat of the car, was Cruz, his body burned beyond recognition. The man who helped him, a good Samaritan, might have witnessed the terrible attack, or perhaps he found Cruz after the men had run off. But what was clear was that Cruz was clinging to life, and it was nothing short of a miracle he had made it this far. When Cruz was rushed into the hospital, his body was a grotesque sight. Nearly 80% of his skin was burned, his flesh charred and still smoldering. Doctors immediately sprang into action, stripping off his clothes to assess the horrific extent of his injuries. The stench of burned flesh hung thick in the air as they worked frantically to stabilize him. Through the searing pain and trauma, Cruz was still able to speak, and he gave a brief account of what had happened to him, his voice hoarse and labored. He told a social worker about the 3 men, the gasoline, and the flames that consumed his body. Then, as if his body had finally had enough, Cruz slipped into a coma. The doctors did their best, but it was too late. 12 days later, he succumbed to his injuries in the burn unit at Cornell Medical Center. His loved ones never left his side, hoping for a miracle, praying for his recovery. They held on to the faintest glimmer of hope that Cruz would awaken, tell them what had happened, and that somehow justice would be served. But that hope was shattered. Despite the details Cruz had shared before losing consciousness, the authorities hit a dead end. No one came forward with information, and there were no witnesses. When officers canvassed the area Cruz mentioned, Pitkin and Grant Avenue, they found nothing. The street was silent, devoid of any clues. It's possible Cruz had been mistaken about the exact location, or perhaps the men had moved him elsewhere before setting him on fire. but no one could say for sure. What was clear was that the brutal act had left no trace, and the case began to fade into the shadows, becoming just another unsolved mystery in the dark streets of East New York. The man who had rushed Cruz to the hospital left as soon as the medical team began working on him. He didn't stay long enough for authorities to question him in detail. In fact, nearly 2 years after the attack, he still hadn't been found. The police only wanted to ask him one simple question: whether he had seen anything or knew who was responsible for the brutal attack. Was there something he witnessed on that night? A crucial piece of information that could unravel the mystery of Cruz's horrifying death? It's unclear if authorities ever managed to track him down, or if he ever provided any answers. Sadly, in many cases like this, the story fades into the background. Time passes, evidence disappears, and the search for answers becomes a quiet echo. But the absence of closure doesn't erase the pain. This case, shrouded in mystery, remains one of those chilling instances where the family of the victim is left with nothing but questions and heartbreak. Without widespread coverage, too many people remain unaware of the lives impacted, the unsolved mysteries that never make headlines. I hope that this video does more than just retell Cruz's story. I hope it stirs something in the minds of those who may remember or know something, however small. It's been years, but justice has no expiration date. It's never too late to bring the truth to light and give a family the closure they desperately need. What happened to Cruz on Halloween night of 1992 was not just cruel, it was senseless. A man who was simply trying to enjoy a holiday with his son, creating memories, only to have his life stolen away. A son who, at just 4 years old, would grow up with one burning question: who took my father's life? He vowed that one day he would find out, and perhaps one day the truth will come to light, if not through the law, then through the relentless pursuit of justice by those who loved Cruz. Because of that one savage act, every Halloween after 1992 brings only sorrow and pain to the Cruz family. What should have been a time for celebration, laughter, and memories is forever tainted by grief and the unanswered question: who are the monsters responsible for this? As the years pass, the pain doesn't fade. It becomes a constant reminder of the brutal loss. This is a family still searching for justice, still holding on to hope that one day the truth will emerge. But for now, they are left with only the echoes of what happened that night and the promise of a future where they may one day have the answers they deserve. Rest in peace, Mr. Cruz. Your story will not be forgotten. My deepest condolences go out to your family and loved ones. You have not been forgotten, and your memory lives on in the hearts of those who loved you.